shoot. Fires from the top of the key and banks it home. The Liberty take a 2-point lead.
Welcome to Liberty FM, the podcast dedicated to all things New York Liberty. I'm Felicia, and I'm joined by my co-host and husband, Francois. This is episode 26, recapping Game 4 of the WNBA Finals between the New York Liberty and Las Vegas Aces. Unfortunately, Liberty fans, this was the final game of the season, and a crushing one at that, as the Liberty lost to the Aces 70-69. Let's get into it.
Yeah, it's a very tough podcast. We just came back from the Barclays not too long ago. Definitely not the outcome we wanted. And I don't know, the first thing that comes to my mind was Rudy Tomljanovic, the former coach of the Houston Rockets, who after a back-to-back championship had said, don't ever underestimate the art of a champion. And I think that is also defining the Las Vegas Aces. We're going to have to give them props. The first back-to-back title since 2002 and the LA Sparks. And they went to get that title in New York. It was very strange because obviously we kept, I kept looking online to get some updates on Chelsea Gray and what was going to be the outcome for her. Obviously you worry about her health, and you also wonder what Game 4 is going to be like. But then we find out that not only Chelsea Gray was out for that game, but Kia Stokes would be out as well with a foot injury. And I don't know why I had a gut feeling that this wasn't necessarily like a victory lap or something that was going to make that game easier for the Liberty, because we know that Becky Hammond is a magician at coaching. Mm-hmm. She's a mastermind. I mean, you got to give props to that woman. Probably hands down the best coach in the WNBA right now, if not in the history of the WNBA, because she came up with a plan for that game, and what a plan defensively.
Yeah, definitely. Defensively, they stopped JJ. I think Jonquel Jones only had 6 points in this game, and she was pretty much double figures throughout the entire series. And, she still got double figures with rebounding, but 6 points, that's not going to cut it, especially when she was the difference maker in all 3 games for the Liberty. And so, defensively, the Aces came out and they had a plan, and primarily it was to stop Jonquel Jones and to let Vandersloot shoot. I think. And Vandersloot did get off some shots. I mean, she still, she was in double figures in points as well. But, JJ was the key. And as I said in the previous podcast, the game goes as JJ and Benijah goes. And that's always been what I thought in this finals matchup. And, it couldn't be just one of them. It had to be both of them getting in there, scoring, defense. It had to be a complete package for Benijah and JJ. And tonight, Benijah, did all that she could defensively. She was getting her points as well offensively. But unfortunately, the Aces came out with just a strong presence on JJ. And, overall, you do have to give the Aces credit. They are the number 1 team for a reason. They have a great coaching staff. And they just, their bench, came out to play. They toughed it out, and they did what they needed to do. They did just enough to just stop the Liberty in certain points. And also, the shots just weren't falling for some of the players, especially Breanna Stewart, unfortunately, because even though you may try to stop JJ, my hope was that, maybe Stewie would go off, and she really didn't go off either, because she was missing a ton of shots too.
Yeah, I mean, that was a tough night for Stewie, 3 for 17 overall from the fields. We kind of she kind of reverted to what she has been doing in the playoff, where, obviously there's a lot of attention on her, but a lot of 4 shots. Mm-hmm. I gotta say, I mean, nobody's gonna care, but there were quite a few fouls that were not called for Stewie and Jonquel Jones compared to to the aces on the other side. But, to be fair, that's not really what really changed the game. So the starting lineup was, very unusual for the aces. They had Alicia Clark, Asia Wilson, Kayla George, Kelsey Plum, and Jackie Young. And as expected, with that lineup, Asia Wilson played 39 minutes out of those 40 minutes. Kelsey Plum as well played 40 minutes. Jackie Young played 37 minutes out of 40. Alicia Clark as well. So heavily relying on their starting lineup. But, the bench players step up. I mean, Kayla George stepped up. Coulson had some decent minutes, bringing some presence defensively. And, it was really very simple. Crowding, JJ. The Liberty could not give her the ball at all. You can't even say that Jonquel Jones had a bad game. It's just like she barely got the ball on the inside. And so you got to give credits to the aces who made her life really difficult, double teaming her in the paint, making sure that they would cut any passes. I cannot recall the number of turnovers for the Liberty, Sabrina and Sloot trying to pass the ball to JJ, but it was like very, in a very careless way as well. So I think, you have to also look at maybe Sandy Brandello, in terms of preparation. Obviously, each team is going to make adjustments, playing so many times against the same team. But I felt like, Becky Hammond knew exactly what the Liberty were going to do offensively. And you didn't really have things in place to adapt to make sure that Jonquel is getting fed in the paint. And so very, very sloppy game to begin with for the Liberty, even though we ended up winning the first quarter 23-13. I mean, the Aces only scored 13 points in the first quarter. Even though we were up by 10, I was really not feeling super confident. You look at the stats. You mentioned the field goal percentage. I mean, we look at the end of the game, 36% overall for the New York Liberty, 9 for 26 at the free-point line, 34%. That is very low numbers. 66% at the free throw line. They actually had one more free throw than the Aces, believe it or not. They just barely won the battle of the rebounds. 19 assists when all season long they were averaging about 24, 25 assists. So I don't know. It was very, very sloppy, and even though we were up by 10, I didn't feel like the Liberty were really in control of that game. Second quarter was the same thing. At some point, the Aces came back to like 4 or 5 points, and we ended up being up by 9 at halftime. But that was not really something that we were really proud of or confident about. And you mentioned Alicia Clark, the last podcast. She was a crucial element to that team tonight.
Yeah, I mean, she is great defensively, and don't sleep on her offense either. She's going to knock down shots as well, but defensively, I think she definitely caused some problems for Stewie. She always has, I thought, through this through these finals. When she was matched up on Stewie, she definitely had a tough time just getting to the basket, getting shots up against Alicia Clark. And so, again, as I said, though Chelsea Gray and Kia Stokes went down with injuries, and many people have said that the Aces, they have a weak bench. You have strong starters. I mean, you still had 3 of the starters who do get most of the points for the team anyway, still on the court. And you just needed defense from your other two teammates coming in. And so, all around, you do have to just tip your cap to the Aces. But also for the Liberty, this is something that they can look at and just look at the way they played and learn from it. And that's all you can do. You learn from it and you build on this. And I think it's the same for the coaches. You have to see, that I thought, and I'm not any coach or player, and even after watching Jonquel Jones in the last 3 games against the Aces, my immediate thought for game 4 was like, they're gonna come after Jonquel Jones.
Of course.
They're gonna come after her. She is your scorer, and so they're going to go after the hot hand, and they're going to defend even harder and be more aggressive on her. And that's exactly what they did. And I just felt like the Liberty didn't make any sort of adjustments to that, or didn't anticipate that maybe. To even maybe setting it up to where, Jonquel now is probably going to get double teamed. They're going to be on her, getting someone else. But again, the Aces are a strong defensive team. So, and they're quick. I will say that. That is the one thing I would say for the Aces. They are much faster than the Liberty. And the Liberty can get up to speed at times, but I think the Aces can sort of withstand that speed throughout an entire game more so than the Liberty can. And so again, they take this time and they can build off of this. I do think for the Liberty, you gotta look at this and see what tweaks need to be made, as a team and individually for themselves. I think this is where the growth is going to come in for people like Sabrina and JJ and the whole team. Really, it's just they're close. Yeah, they're not there yet. They're close.
Yeah, I mean that will probably be a podcast itself where we'll take time to analyze the season and player by player, and then probably another podcast to talk about the future season and how we could make tweaks on that roster. The two things that comes to mind when it comes to the roster and also the second half. I've read a lot, I've always liked reading on Twitter what people have to say about, the Liberty or the other, all the teams in general. And something that comes up often is that a lot of people think there's a lack of leadership on that team. Now, nobody's questioning the talent, but a lack of leadership in terms of being the vocal leader or the player that at some point is going to carry the team and really in clutch moments. I mean, you could argue that obviously Breanna Stewart has been that player in the regular season, but she has been inconsistent, at least in those playoffs. And it's true that at times where you didn't really know whose team is it, who's the leader in that team, who's gonna carry that team. Whereas the Las Vegas Aces, no Chelsea Gray, but that A'ja Wilson is gonna have a massive game, and she had 24 points, 16 rebounds, and I felt like in that third and fourth quarter, when they started to make a comeback and it's at some point taking the lead, they were just feeding her the ball, and that was my biggest scare. I was like, man, A'ja is gonna go off for a 40-45 point game because I'm the Aces. I'm just giving her the ball. And Sandy said after the game that they couldn't stop her, and they were late sometimes on adjustments and rotations, and she had way more freedom than usual. I mean, it's hard enough to stop A'ja, but I felt like she was able to get favorable spots and being aggressive and attack the baskets. And, Jonquel Jones, who's been a great defender on A'ja, even her was struggling to stop her. And so I think that's when they started making that comeback. And I was very scared. I was very quiet because I was struggling to figure out who's going to step up in that game. And what was also clever from the Aces is that they deliberately decided that, if you're going to beat us, we're going to just let Courtney Vandersloot wide open. And it's another player that has been very inconsistent in terms of field goal percentage all throughout the playoffs. But even in the season, we mentioned before that, shooting-wise, it has not been the best season. But they just left her wide open throughout the whole game. And you could, argue that obviously she was the best scorer of the Liberty with 19 points. She was 4 for 8 at the three-point line, 7 for 16 overall. But I do feel like it kind of suited the Aces to just let Vandersloot take shots, because that meant that other players were not involved. Sabrina scored a couple of threes, but I felt like if there was a game for her to go off, it was that game, and she didn't show that offensively. And defensively, she wasn't there at the level needed. Very lazy defense, not just her, but when you let Kayla George, yes, she's not the greatest shooter, but she still managed to score like 3 threes in the game at a time that it really mattered. Field goal percentage wise, it was not great. She was 4 for 14, 3 for 10 at the 3-point line. But I do feel like she had baskets that matter at a time where the Aces really needed it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for George, she had buckets back to back that helped the Aces stay close in this game and come back in this game. And, every basket counts. I mean, when you look at it, the Liberty lost by 1 point.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, you have to think about the fact that you let a player that, she's not normally playing with the team that much and doesn't normally get to shoot that much. She's scoring threes, at timely moments. And also your free throws. You're losing by 1 point.
Yeah.
You look back on not making certain free throws,
Dawson,
missing, between
Marine.
Dawson, Marine, and it's hard because when you lose by so little, you start, everything else starts to be magnified, and so it's a tough one. It's a tough one to swallow, Liberty fans, but I do think that, the Aces, they were the better team tonight, and if you felt like this was the first game too where the score was so close.
Yeah.
Because usually between these two teams, one team is blowing out the other in some fashion, at least more than 10 points. Whereas this one, I was like, this is a grudge match. Who's this gonna come down to? And I just felt like when we got into the third quarter and the Aces were scoring and the Liberty weren't getting any shots going down or turning it over, that I was like, this is just not Liberty basketball.
Yeah.
And I am also nervous that they're gonna let this one slip away. And, it was interesting to even see somebody tweet, like, do the Liberty not realize that if they lose this game, they go home? There's no other game after this. And
Definitely.
You just felt sort of like there wasn't enough urgency. And I don't know if maybe they were tired or whatever, but the urgency wasn't there like it was in Game 3.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they felt like, we still got this, we're going to come back, and maybe being a little overconfident, I don't know, but the shots were not getting in. And on the other end, and I'm just looking at the stat right now, the Aces scored 44 points in the paint versus 24 for the New York Liberty. Mm-hmm. A 20 points differential in the paint. And when you look at, outside shooting, whether it's mid-range or threes, the Liberty could not get a shot. Yeah. And, the Aces on the other end, giving the ball to Asia Wilson. And Jackie Young, who had a very quiet first half, second half, especially fourth quarter, she went off. She was aggressive. She was attacking the basket. I mean, Benaja was still defending very well on her, but she was still getting basket. Some questionables as well in terms of like having maybe extra steps. But, she was going after it. She was aggressive, and that made a huge difference. And at some point, I think there was about a little over a minute left in the fourth quarter. Mm. The Aces were up by 6, and at that point, I felt like it was over for the Liberty. But they gave a final push, though. A free by Courtney Vandersloot that brought this game to a 3-point game. A very strong defense afterwards, and that led to a turnover by the Aces. Sabrina miraculously had one of the few mid-range of the season to bring this game to a 1-point game. The Aces took their final timeout. The Liberty defended really well and managed to, get the ball back after 24 seconds. And so the game was on the line. Everybody was asking for a game that is tight and that could be a winning basketball. All the games throughout the season between those two teams have been blown ups. And now the game on the line, 8.8 seconds left. The Aces are up by 1. And you kind of know that they might run a play with Stewie. They've been doing it all season long. It's this sort of inverted play. The problem was that Stewie was 3 for 17 for the game. Yeah. And you sort of wonder, is this really a good idea to play for Stewie at that very moment? And that's what they did. They, Sabrina was doing the inbounds. They almost lost the ball. Pass it to Stewie. The defense was very strong on Stewie, who had to pass it to Benijah. When I look back at the video I recorded, Kelsey Plum went straight to Benijah to sort of deter her from taking the shots. Maybe a little pump fake or faking the pass and just having a mid-range, but easier said than done in that moment. She decides to pass it for Vandersloot. Vandersloot is wide open in that corner and take the shots. Missed it pretty badly, pretty wild. Jonquel Jones take the rebound and score, but unfortunately, by the time she got the rebound, time ran out, and the Las Vegas Aces are your back-to-back champions. Running in the middle of the court, and that was tough to watch, but really kudos to them. That was, an incredible win for them under those circumstances. But we gotta give, props, still to our team. It was still an unbelievable season. I mean, that's the first time in my life that I get to experience a final, and it was the first time in a very long time, for basketball at least, that a New York team was in the final. The atmosphere today and 2 days ago was incredible once again. A lot of people show up. I'm sure it's going to be sold out and pretty much the same amount of people as the last game. Yeah. But it's tough to watch the Aces on your own court winning. And so there's not much else to say, really. A lot of disappointment from the players post-game. It must be like the hardest thing to do. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions in terms of like the roster, how to improve it, who's going to stay, who's going to go. That would be for another time. I think we have to give ourselves a bit of time, a bit of rest, a bit of time to process everything and come back to that. But, any last final words, Felicia, for the Liberty season? And on a sour note.
Even though it did end on a sour note, the Liberty had a tremendous season from where they started, bringing this group together, having to trust the process of who, like the roles of each player. They had to trust in the process because some of these roles changed, and just to see everyone blossom into the players they are now is just incredible to watch. And so I think for the Liberty, yes, this is a tough loss, it's a tough one to swallow, but at the same time, you definitely made huge strides through this season to be where you are. Like, when you look at how these teams are constructed, yeah, you might have called New York a super team, and even for Breanna Stewart even said it, like, we're not great yet. She felt like they're getting there, and I think that is still true. I think they're getting there, and I think, up against the Aces, who are a great team, that team was formed and they were gelled for the last few years now. And so for them, they know very well how to play with each other. And I think the Liberty are still learning that in ways so that they can gel. And, I think even for next season, they'll come out bigger and better because they're going to have a little chip on their shoulder knowing they came close, and I think for them, hopefully everyone comes back. I know maybe there might be some changes in there, and I think, changes may be necessary to try to improve the team a little bit. But again, I don't think for the season they can look back on it and know they fought hard. And, you take the criticisms, you take the things that you need to learn and improve on, and you improve on them. But really, the whole season, that's nothing to hang your head about. You should walk tall and be proud of the season you had. And you just went up against a really, really tough team. That, in the end, they scrapped. They were scrappy out there, and they found a way to get this win. Yeah,
so thank you guys so much for listening to our podcast, and I'm sure it must be just as hard as for us to record it for you to listen, but it's kind of like a little therapy time for Liberty fans. And so despite the sadness, it is quite therapeutic to do that. So thank you so much for listening to us. We'll definitely keep you posted on future podcasts, reviewing the players and the coaching staff and reviewing the season overall. And then also doing another podcast, sort of projecting ourselves to next season and what the roster could look like for next season. We'll keep you posted. But as we always said for at the end of every podcast, let's go Liberty!